I warmly welcome everyone joining us for this self-knowledge course. Today we'll explore a truly fascinating subject, the universal and the individual Christ. In this session, we'll look deeper into what this powerful force, known as the Christ, really is, both in its universal and individual aspects. The goal of this conference is for us to clearly understand the meaning of the Christ and to discover how we can awaken and develop our individual Christ so that we may unite with the great cosmic power called the universal Christ. What exactly is the Christ? It's important that we go beyond the merely historical perspective because the Christ is not just a figure of the past. The Christ is a living reality, something present from moment to moment, from second to second. The first thing to grasp is this: the Christ is a force of our consciousness, a divine power that can be incarnated. Throughout history, many beings, called great masters or enlightened ones, have incarnated this force. To understand this, we must free our minds from the limitations of dogma and rigid beliefs that confine the Christ to a single person. In truth, the Christ has manifested across cultures and throughout the ages. For example, in China, the Christ was known as Fu Xi. Among the Toltecs, the Christ was Quetzalcoatl. In Japan, the Christ was Amitabha. In Greece, the Christ was Heracles, called Hercules by the Romans, and the 12 labors of Hercules symbolize the inner work the Christ must carry out on the second and third mountains of initiation. In Egypt, the Christ was Osiris. Within the Egyptian mysteries, when a master achieved Christification, it was said that he had become an Osiris, as in the case of Hermes Trismegistus. Other examples include Buddha in Nepal and Krishna in India. These are only a few of the many manifestations of the Christ. What we see is that long before Jesus of Nazareth, there were already Christs in various cultures and eras. And after Jesus, there were also Christs: Muhammad, Dante Alighieri, Saint Germain, Cagliostro, Samael Aun-Weor, Rabelais, and even figures like Joan of Arc and Saint Teresa of Avila, because Christification is not limited to men alone. All of them were people who, through profound inner work, incarnated their own inner Christ. But of all these manifestations, the one best known worldwide is undoubtedly Master Jesus. And what made Master Jesus so special? What sets him apart is that he fulfilled a sacred mission, one that must be carried out in every great race, and one that only beings of the highest hierarchy can accomplish. He came in physical form to represent the cosmic drama of Christification, to demonstrate through his life the path that every initiate must live within themselves to achieve their own Christification. Beings like Jesus fulfill this mission to leave an indelible message in the collective memory of humanity, a point of reference for anyone who sets out on the inner path toward awakening. Now that we've reflected on the role of the historical Christ, let us look more closely at the universal and the individual Christ, so that we can better understand this force that Jesus and so many other masters incarnated, and that we too can embody if we carry out the necessary inner work. Let's begin by clarifying what we mean by the universal Christ. The universal Christ is what we call the army of the voice, and it's important to understand that the army of the voice, the army of the word, is fire. This living fire, this sacred and philosophical fire, is what makes chaotic matter fertile. It is the cosmic Christ, the Logos, the great word. This universal fire is the creative principle, the living power that fertilizes matter and brings it into form. According to its own divine laws, this fire can create, transform, or destroy. To try to understand the essence of fire is to try to understand God himself, for throughout history, the divine has always revealed his presence through fire. For example, in the sacred scriptures, God manifested to Moses in the form of the burning bush, and again upon Mount Sinai, when the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, was given. St. John also describes a vision of the divine, a being of flame-colored jasper and sardonyx, seated upon a radiant and incandescent throne, the ruler of the entire universe. And St. Paul, in his epistle to the Hebrews, writes simply, "Our God is a devouring fire." This universal fire is the army of the voice, composed of the self-realized beings who illuminate the cosmos. The Christ is this fire, manifested through the creative word of these beings. It is the fire that creates, the fire that transforms, the fire that destroys, and the fire that constantly renews all of nature. The Christ is the Creator. This sacred fire holds the power to bring atoms into existence, or to dissolve them back into nothingness. It commands the universal forces, capable of uniting atoms to form entire universes, and just as capable of disintegrating those universes when the cycle ends. Our world itself is like a sphere of fire, born and extinguished according to divine laws. This Christic force, which is fire, has the power to create, to renew, and to destroy. It gives birth to atoms, to planets, to galaxies, and to entire universes. It also forms the various vehicles and bodies in which countless divine sparks, souls like ours, will inhabit the physical world to gain experience. These sparks descend into matter with a mission, to awaken their consciousness. And once they accomplish this, they return to the Absolute as individual Christs, becoming part of the universal Christ, the great army of the Word. The universal Christ is the union of all the Christs, all the awakened, self-realized beings across the galaxy who have achieved their own Christification. These beings, who form the universal Christ, are fully conscious and have chosen to participate in the work of creation. Through their divine unfoldment and sacred union, they generate the third force, fire. For the Logos, the divine word, to manifest, the one must unfold into two, the Father within the Mother. And from the union of these two complementary forces, the third is born, the fire. This sacred fire is then manifested through the Word to bring creation into existence. That is why, in paintings and sculptures, angels are often depicted holding trumpets and swords. The trumpets represent the power to manifest fire through the Word, the creative vibration of sound, of mantras. The swords, on the other hand, symbolize the same fire expressed in its destructive aspect. This fire is the Logos, the Christ, the living Word that makes the existence of the universe possible at the dawn of any creation. And this Christic force, this universal fire, is contained within everything that exists. It is within every germ, every seed that generates life. And within us, it is present in our own creative seed, deposited in our sexual glands. This is why, through sex, we can create another living being. But when we learn to use sex wisely, practicing superior sexuality, we can also create ourselves internally, awakening, transforming, and ultimately developing our inner Christ. Now, let us ask ourselves, what must those beings do who wish to belong to the army of the voice? The answer is found within the cosmic drama. Much has been written and spoken about this great drama. Unquestionably, it is revealed through the four Gospels. We are told that the cosmic drama was brought to earth by the Elohim, and that the great Lord of Atlantis represented this sacred drama in flesh and bone. Later, the great Kabir Jesus also had to enact the same drama publicly in the Holy Land. Master Jesus carried the profound mission of representing this divine drama so that humanity could see the way, the path that every initiate must follow in order to awaken and develop the intimate Christ within. This is why Jesus declared, "I am the way." He came to show us through his life the living example of the path we must walk if we wish to ascend spiritually. Within the life of Master Jesus, we find symbolized everything that the initiate must experience within themselves. The trials, the sacrifices, the pains, the crucifixion, the death, and ultimately the resurrection, all of these represent the steps on the inner path toward Christification. It is not an easy path. And that is precisely why so many choose instead to worship the Master, rather than undertake the profound inner work required to achieve what he achieved. On the cross of the martyr of Calvary, the entire mystery of Christ is summed up in a single formula of 4 letters, INRI. Esoterically, this stands for Ignis Natura Renovatur Integram, meaning fire incessantly renews nature. And this, in truth, is the essence of the Christ. But this real meaning has been hidden from humanity, just as the deeper understanding of Jesus' life and work has also been concealed. Even more so, his sexual life has been veiled in secrecy. The teachings tell us that Jesus carried out the great work of Christification together with his partner, Mary Magdalene. Yet this fact has been systematically hidden from us for centuries. Instead, the world has been led to believe that he lived in absolute celibacy. The reality is quite different. The great secret is that it is through sex, used in a sacred and conscious way, that we can perform the same inner work. It is through this process that we can awaken, develop our individual Christ, and eventually become one with the universal Christ. The universal Christ is nothing less than the union of all the individual Christs within a galaxy, the great collective force of all those who have achieved self-realization and Christification. Now, let us see how and where we can find the Christ within ourselves. Let us look at the individual Christ. It is said that temptation is fire and triumph over temptation is light. This reveals a profound truth. Our inner fire, our creative energy, is trapped within the very things that tempt us, within the countless desires of our ego. Every time we overcome a temptation, every time we rise above a desire, we liberate a portion of that fire. And that liberated fire becomes light, inner illumination and wisdom. Since the Christ is fire, if we wish to incarnate the Christic force within ourselves, we must first free this fire by learning to deny our desires and by refusing to fall into temptation. The intimate Christ lies dormant within our seed. This sacred fire, our essence, our spirit, our light, is contained within the seminal energy. But right now, much of our consciousness, about 97% of it, is trapped by the ego. And how does the ego express itself in our daily lives? Through desires, constantly, moment by moment. This fire, this energy, is the driving force within us, the encouragement that moves us to act. Yet, because it is currently conditioned by the ego, our motivation often flows in the wrong direction. We find ourselves with plenty of energy for laziness, for endlessly watching TV, scrolling on the phone, gossiping, arguing, fornicating, going out drinking, and so on. But when it comes to the things of our being, the actions that awaken our consciousness, we often lack the same enthusiasm. To release this fire, to awaken the Christ within, we must learn to deny our desires. And denying our desires means denying ourselves. This is precisely what Master Jesus meant when he told his disciples, "If anyone wishes to follow the Christ, they must first deny themselves." To deny ourselves is to refuse the ego's impulses moment by moment. If we fail to do this, if we continue giving in to every desire, we will remain slaves to those desires, endlessly repeating the same mistakes, lifetime after lifetime. But if we choose the other path, if we deny the ego, resist temptation, and free our inner fire, we rescue light, which is wisdom. We rescue spirit, which is our true essence. Then gradually our energy, the encouragement within us, begins to shift. We find strength and motivation for the things of our being, to meditate, to eliminate our negative patterns, to transmute our sexual energy, and to share this knowledge with others. It is essential to understand that the development of our individual Christ takes place through the practice of the three factors of the revolution of consciousness. Through the first factor, psychological death, we learn to deny our desires and liberate the fire that is trapped within the psychological self. Moment by moment, through self-observation, we watch the different I's as they arise within us, those many aspects of the ego that manifest as desires in our daily lives. We observe them, we judge them to understand their nature, and then, with the help of our particular Divine Mother, we eliminate them. In doing so, we release the fire, we rescue our essence, and we recover the light and encouragement that belong to our awakened consciousness. It's also important to realize that the Christic force, that sacred fire, is contained within our sexual energy. This is why, when we waste this energy, we are also wasting the Christic energy within us. In doing so, we betray our inner Christ. That is why chastity, the conscious transmutation of sexual energy, is absolutely essential. Through the factor of birth, we take the fire we have recovered through psychological death and raise it within us. By practicing suprasex, we guide this energy upward through our spinal column, creating our internal bodies, the superior vehicles that allow us to work in the higher dimensions. And finally, through the third factor, the factor of sacrifice, we open our hearts to love, love for our own inner work and love for humanity. We share this knowledge in its pure form, so that others, too, may find the tools to awaken their own consciousness. One of the essential functions of the Christ is precisely this, to consciously sacrifice himself for humanity, offering the way back to the divine. When we practice this third factor, we too align ourselves with this universal purpose. Now, at what moment is the Christ born within us? As we discussed in Conference 11, where we talked about the fabrication of our human soul, The process begins when we start practicing suprasex. Instead of wasting our sexual energy, we consciously transmute it, guiding it upward through the spine, and we manage to ignite the sacred fire of the Kundalini. This marks the beginning of a great transformation. First, we regenerate our physical and vital bodies, which are currently degenerated and in a lunar state, turning them into solar bodies. Then, we start creating our astral, mental, and causal solar bodies, bodies of which we only have an embryo or principle at the moment. Once these bodies are created, we gain the ability to move consciously and voluntarily through the superior dimensions. This takes place along what is called the first mountain of initiation. During this process, we eventually arrive at a decisive moment, specifically in the fifth initiation, during the creation of the causal body, also known as the body of will. Here, we face a crucial choice, a trial presented by the guardian of the world of will. We must decide between the direct path and the path of nirvana. Choosing the path of nirvana means that our inner advancement halts at that point. We retain all the powers and faculties we have gained up to then and enjoy a state of bliss and abundance for hundreds or even thousands of years. But when that cycle ends, we must return and start the process again, attempting once more to achieve liberation. By taking this path, we delay our final awakening. Sadly, 999 out of every 1,000 initiates choose this path, unconsciously betraying their intimate Christ. However, if we choose the direct path, the narrow and difficult road, we accept a journey of sacrifice and pain, but also the only path that leads us to the Father, uniting us with the great cosmic force known as the universal Christ. At that point, we will have already created our human soul and become true men, and only then can the Son of Man, the Christ, be born within us. Without first becoming true men, the birth of the Christ is impossible. Once we have formed our human soul, we can unite it with our divine soul, the Buddhic body. This union is called the perfect matrimony, and it is precisely from this union of the human and the divine that the Christ is born within us. At that moment, we will truly experience Christmas within our hearts, because even if Christ were born 1,000 times in Bethlehem, it would serve no purpose, unless he is also born within us. And even if he had died and risen on the third day, it would mean nothing, unless he also dies and rises again inside us. The intimate Christ awakens within us through the inner work, the work of dissolving the psychological I, and this awakening only becomes possible at the very peak of our intentional efforts and voluntary sufferings. The arrival of the Christic fire is the most important event of our entire existence. When Christ is born and begins to develop within us, this Christic force gradually takes control of all our inner processes, our thoughts, our emotions, our instincts, our movements, and even our sexual energy. Everything within us begins to be guided by the Christic consciousness. One of the great tasks of the intimate Christ is the elimination of the 7 causal I's, the deepest seeds of the ego. In ancient traditions, this was symbolized in different ways. In the Egyptian mysteries, it was represented as defeating the red demons of Seth, and in the Greek and Roman mysteries, it was depicted as completing the 12 labors of Hercules. The intimate Christ is, without question, our profound inner Savior. This celestial fire, the living philosophical fire, must be born within us, and it is only born when we have advanced far enough in our psychological work. Without the intimate Christ, the causes of the ego cannot be dissolved. The intimate Christ is the fire of all fires, the purest of the pure. And we are invited to undertake our inner work, to become bathed, cleansed, and purified by this celestial fire, so that we may unite with and ultimately become part of the cosmic Christ. Remember, the cosmic Christ is the collective essence of all the individual Christs within an entire galaxy. Here we can see some examples of masters who have reached the level of Christs. Among them, we find Jeshua ben Pandira, Jesus, together with John the Baptist, Matthew, and Judas Iscariot. There are also great initiates like Enoch and Melchizedek, as well as masters such as Kuthumi and Sanat Kumara. We also have the archangels Raphael, Uriel, Michael, Oriphiel, and Samael on Weor. Other enlightened beings include Rabbelu, St. Augustine, and Moria, better known as St. Francis of Assisi, along with St. Teresa and Joan of Arc. We can also mention philosophers and sages like Dante Alighieri, Plato, Pythagoras, Orpheus, and Apollonius of Tyana. Likewise, there are the great spiritual guides Hermes Trismegistus, Buddha Gautama Sakyamuni, Krishna, Fu Xi, Lao Tse, and Zoroaster the Zarathustra. We cannot forget Muhammad, Quetzalcoatl, Kalusuanga, and Bochica, as well as mystics such as Paracelsus, Rakowski, Rochbach, Fulcanelli, Nicholas Flamel, Cagliostro, and Ramon Llull. And of course, there are many others. This has been today's topic. We invite you to reflect deeply on this, to reach an understanding, and be encouraged to interview one of these masters through astral projection, to corroborate these teachings. Also remember that any questions you have, you can leave them in the comments, and we will be happy to answer them. Before we conclude, I'd like to invite you to the next conference. It will be a fascinating topic, where we'll study another of the 48 laws that govern this world, the law of the pendulum. In that lecture, we'll learn how this law operates, and more importantly, how we can transcend it to reach the truth about any aspect of life. Don't miss it. Until next time.